Today I'll be discussing Shadows of Supremacy, Americo-Liberians, Anti-Blackness, and the Colonial Legacy of Liberia. Liberia, Africa's first Black republic, was born out of a complex fusion of hope and contradiction. Founded by freed African Americans seeking refuge from U.S. racism, became a nation where the descendants of enslaved people recreated social and political hierarchies that often mirrored the very anti-Black structures they fled. The Americo-Liberians freed African Americans who settled and ruled Liberia, engaged in a subtle form of anti-Blackness, not only by marginalizing indigenous African populations, but often internalizing white supremacist ideas of civilization and modernity. Their governance style, economy, and foreign diplomacy too often reflected a colonial mindset that alienated them from the African majority and deeply shaped Liberia's trajectory.
Hi, you're in class with Dr. T.
As the eminent Pan-Africanist Edward Wilmot Blyden observed, a group of returned exiles, refugees from the house of bondage, settled along a few hundred miles of the coast of their fatherland, attempting to rule millions of people, their own kith and kin, on a foreign system in which they themselves have been imperfectly trained, while knowing very little of the facts of the history of the people they assume to rule, either social, economic, or religious, and taking for granted that the religious and social theories they have brought from across the sea must be adopted to all the need of their unexpatriated brethren. Liberia is a little bit of South Carolina, of Georgia, of Virginia, that is to say, of the ostracized, suppressed, depressed elements of these states, tacked on to West Africa. A most incongruous combination with no reasonable prospect of success, and further complicated by additions from other sources. We take a bit from England, a bit from France, a little bit from Germany, and try to compromise with all. We have no definite plan, no dominating race conception, with really nothing to help us from behind the scene whence we came, and nothing to guide us from before the goal to which we are tending or should tend. We are severed from the parent stock, the Aborigines, who are the root, branch, and flower of Africa and of any Negro state in Africa. This quote is taken from the selected published writings of Edward Wilmot Blyden. Liberia's founding in 1822 was orchestrated by the American Colonization Society, ACS, a coalition of white philanthropists, slaveholders, and a few free Black elites. Their goal was to repatriate freed African Americans to Africa, a project steeped in white anxiety over free Black populations in the U.S. While framed as benevolent, the ACS motives were racially paternalistic. They sought to remove Black people from America rather than integrate them as equals. The land for Liberia was acquired through treaties, often coerced or misunderstood, with West African leaders, establishing a coastal enclave for settlers who would become the Americo-Liberians. Most African Americans in the 19th century rejected the ACS in its colonization scheme, seeing it as a racist attempt to exile Black citizens rather than improve their status in the U.S. Leaders like Frederick Douglass and David Walker denounced the project as a betrayal of African American claims to full citizenship. Still, a small group of conservatives or disillusioned Black Americans supported colonization, some genuinely seeking freedom, others embracing the ACS civilizing rhetoric. These reactionaries would become the core of Liberia's ruling class. Liberia's early settlers faced deep tension between their identities as Black Americans and Africans. They struggled to build a nation on African soil while maintaining cultural and political loyalty to American norms. Rather than integrate with indigenous populations, they replicated settler colonial hierarchies, establishing exclusive institutions and often forcing indigenous communities into submission through taxation, forced labor, and cultural suppression. The settlers' Christianity, Western education, and dress codes became markers of status and quote unquote civilized, became synonymous with Americanized. From 1847, when Liberia declared independence, until 1980, Americo-Liberians ruled exclusively, forming a political oligarchy centered around the true Whig Party. Power was concentrated in elite families, such as the Tubmans and Barclays, who maintained a rigid hierarchy. Indigenous Liberians were largely denied citizenship, voting rights, and access to government. Policies and legal systems were designed to benefit the settler elite, often to the detriment of rural Africans who formed the labor base of the economy. Economically, Americo-Liberians controlled trade routes and ports, acting as middlemen between rural producers and foreign markets. Liberia's main exports, palm oil, coffee, rubber, were sent to European and American buyers. The ruling elite depended on foreign capital and trade to sustain their comfortable lifestyles. Liberia was heavily indebted and often signed exploitive contracts with foreign investors to stay solvent. These arrangements preserved Americo-Liberians' wealth while further alienating indigenous populations. Liberia served U.S. geopolitical interests as a black republic that symbolized the quote-unquote success of American civilization, providing a moral counter to critique U.S. racism. Though the U.S. never formally colonized Liberia, it used the country as a soft power tool in Africa. Yet, when Liberia needed help, particularly during European encroachment, the U.S. remained largely passive. During the scramble for Africa, Liberia's sovereignty was repeatedly violated by European powers. France and Britain seized Liberian territories under the guise of boundary disputes, cutting off Liberia's access to key inland resources. Liberia's weakness militarily and economically made it a pawn in European imperial games. The U.S., despite its influence, refused to confront European powers on Liberia's behalf, highlighting the limits of black sovereignty in a white-dominated world order. In 1926, Firestone Tire and Rubber Company signed a 99-year lease with Liberia for 1 million acres to produce rubber. This agreement gave Firestone enormous economic and political power in Liberia. While it provided jobs and infrastructure, it also entrenched foreign dominance over Liberians' land and labor. Firestone relied on Americo-Liberians' elites to enforce labor systems, thereby reinforcing the settler hierarchy and limiting wealth redistribution. W.E.B. Du Bois viewed Liberia as a symbol of black potential, but also critiqued its elites' insularity and undemocratic practices. He hoped for a more inclusive Pan-African Liberia that united Africans in the diaspora. Marcus Garvey, on the other hand, saw Liberia as a potential home for his Back to Africa movement, but was rebuffed by Americo-Liberian leaders who feared being overwhelmed by poor black migrants. Both thinkers saw Liberia as important, but lamented its limitations. The Americo-Liberians ruled Liberia from 1847 until 1980, a period of 133 years. This dominance rested on foreign support, economic control, and exclusion of indigenous Liberians from power. But by the 1970s, discontent was boiling as the majority population grew increasingly frustrated with elite privilege and social inequality. On April 12, 1980, Samuel Doe, an indigenous army sergeant, led a coup that overthrew and executed President William Tolbert. This marked the end of Americo-Liberian rule. Though promised reform, but soon established a corrupt autocratic regime that fueled ethnic tensions and economic collapse. He favored his own ethnic group and ruled through patronage and fear until he was brutally killed in 1990. Charles Taylor, who led a rebel movement toppled though, was of Americo-Liberian descent, though he had ties to both settler and indigenous groups. His presidency, which lasted from 1997 to 2003, brought no relief. His rule was marked by war crimes, authoritarianism, and further economic devastation during Liberia's long civil war. In 2006, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the first woman elected president in all of Africa, took office. She too is of Americo-Liberian heritage, though she sought to build a more inclusive democracy. Her leadership helped stabilize Liberia's post-Civil War, but questions remained about the concentration of wealth and power among Americo-descended elites. Today, while political representation is more inclusive, Americo-Liberians continue to occupy many elite economic and diplomatic positions. Their cultural capital, English fluency, Western education, transnational networks still gives them an edge in Liberia's post-war capitalist system. The history of Liberia reveals how anti-Blackness and white supremacy are not confined to white rulers or colonial empires. They are systems that can be reproduced by those who have internalized them. Even while resisting their original forms, the Americo-Liberians, shaped by U.S. racial hierarchies, recreated them on African soils to a large extent. Because governing through exclusion, cultural superiority, and foreign dependence was the norm. Liberia's uneven development, political instability, and elite dominance cannot be understood without reckoning with how white supremacy helped shape its structures economically, politically, and psychologically. True decolonization in Liberia will require more than democratic elections. It will demand a reckoning within its foundational caste logic and a reimagining of national identity grounded in equality and unity, not hierarchy and imitation. Thank you. Please like, please share, please subscribe, and smash that bell